All of a sudden we start taking mortar fire. I'm yelling at the troops, get in the bunkers. I remember thinking, you got about 3 seconds before that thing detonates. There was a young doctor who had written the words, "You're deaf," on that dry erase board. And I knew for a fact that very moment that my career was over. I grew up in Abilene, Texas. We were a very patriotic family. My dad served in World War II, and we're the kind of family that when the national anthem was played, even on TV, we stood up. And so I thought, you know what? I'll go join the military and come back after 4 years, and I'll finish my education. That was the plan. And then I was asked to go to counterintelligence school and language school, and that really was a great niche for me. Because of my stature being small, and at that time I looked young, nobody would have suspected me being a counterintelligence agent. I made Command Sgt. Major. That's the highest rank an enlisted person can make in the military. And then in December of 2004, I was selected to be the commander of all of Afghanistan. I led 30,000 troops. If you were to look on the encyclopedia under Command Sgt. Major, it would not be my picture. You know, didn't necessarily look the part, but my leaders. I saw past that and saw the qualities that I had. I'm in the service of my country. I'm in the service of my troops. In 2006, I had landed at this base right on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I'd been on the ground maybe a couple of minutes. And all of a sudden we start taking mortar fire. It came in like rain. And so I'm yelling at the troops, get in the bunkers, get in the bunkers. And then before I could get myself in a bunker, a round landed to my right. I remember hearing that round hit. And then I remember thinking, you got about 3 seconds before that thing detonates. When that round exploded, it threw me horizontally, kind of picked me up and threw me through the air. I was knocked out completely. And then the next time I woke up was in Landstuhl. The blast itself kind of took all my internal organs and kind of rearranged them a little bit. And then I had a million pieces of metal that were inside the places that weren't protected by my flak jacket. There was a young doctor, and he's standing next to my bed, and he's got a white dry erase board, and he's writing something on it, and he waves to get my attention, and he flips it over, and he had written the words, "You're deaf," on that dry erase board. I'm thinking, I'm deaf. And I took the board from him and I erased it with my hand and I wrote the word "forever," and he nodded his head. And I knew for a fact that very moment that my career was over, gone, done. My whole identity was being a sergeant major, and now I was just an oxygen thief walking the face of the earth. I had to deal with the fact that I lost my hearing forever. And I opted to go to lip reading school, and that was a great decision because I am able, for the most part, to communicate with people fairly well. But the real battle was finding my new passion and purpose. And so I'm a big runner. I've always been a runner, and I was out running one day in Atlanta. There was a guy on a bicycle, and he yells out, "Passing you on your left." Of course, I never heard that because he was behind me. So I moved to the left, and then he hit me, and he threw me into traffic. I'm in the emergency room, and my doctor walks in, and he says to me, "What your life used to look like is not reality for you now." And the thought that came to me was like, no, I want my life back. And he says to me, "Gretchen, do they train service dogs for deaf people?" I found the website to America's Vet Dogs, So I wrote an email, and then I said a little prayer, and I sent it. About 7 months later, I get my first hearing dog. Her name was Aura. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel like a deaf person in the world because she alerted me to sounds that I couldn't hear. She saved my life. She saved it, and then she gave me purpose. All of a sudden, I didn't feel disabled. My second half of my career was then to say, I'm going to help as many people as I can, and to give their best back to their life, and to know that they're worthy. And one day, I get an email from a really good friend of mine named Eric Weimeyer, and who happens to be the first blind man that ever summited Mount Everest. He says, Gretchen, they're bringing back the world's toughest race, the Eco Challenge.
The world's toughest race is underway.
He says, I want you to put together a team of mixed ability people and go and compete. And I said, okay. So I call my blown up friends. Say, hey, you guys want to go do this with me? And of course they said, yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Getting to know Gretchen and hearing her story, it became quickly apparent that there was no option to say no. She calls me and she said, I think I'm going to apply to do what's called the world's toughest race. It's an adventure race, it's in Fiji, it's with Bear Grylls, all these crazy things.
So finally, the team I ended up with was myself and another combat veteran named Keith, who had been blown up by an IED. And Hal was a civilian, and he had had a very severe back injury from a water ski accident. And Anne, who is a very severe type 1 diabetic. And so Team Unbroken went to Fiji.
Disabilities don't have to define you. And so that's why we showed up.
We didn't do well in that race, but what they saw was the spirit of the team. We did better than some teams and worse than most. We wanted to compete, and that was the victory for us. Just to be like the average person out there who wants to engage in any sort of bike riding or running or climbing or whatever it is that you want to do. I loved my military career, but this is, to me, just as important, if not more important, than what I did in the military. I'm still in service. I'm just serving a different population.
The thing that I love most about being friends with Gretchen is that there's always something in her mind on behalf of a whole group of other people. Her wheels are always spinning about how can we inspire, how can we empower, how can we connect more people.
To be quite honest with you, I will say this, I'm not glad I got blown up because that was not a good day, but it made me a better person. It made me more empathetic, it made me more sympathetic. It broadened my own horizons. I think I didn't have an ideal about what the world of mixed ability people looked like or felt like until I became one. We believe that what's within you is stronger than anything that's in your way. You are worthy and that you do have a place in the world. I now see the potential of what I can do, and I no longer feel broken.